16, right? I didn't see the other one. So discussion are 15 and 16. Or, sorry, 13 and 16. So you'll need to do a motion on the MSP 15 as well.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, September 2nd, 2021, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, August 26, 2021, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
Move we approve the minutes of Thursday, August 26, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with items 2 through 12, or agenda item 15, accepting Northern State Power Company's proposed revisions to the EVC1 tariff.
Move we approve the notice of investigation associated with agenda item 2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. For agenda items 3 through 12, I move to approve the associated notices of proceedings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. For agenda item 15, docket 4220 TE 104, I move we accept the application of Northern State Power Company for approval to modify the tariff language associated with its commercial electric vehicle service program pilot.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's it.
Agenda item 14 has been laid over.
So that takes us to agenda item 13, which is docket 5-EI-158. This is the roadmap to zero carbon investigation that's been open, and then earlier this year, out a memo. The commission staff identified 5 potential topics for which parties were invited to submit comments, and we received comments from, we received 48 different responses, and so staff combed through all of those responses, all of that information, and based on what came in, they tried to sort of winnow things down for us to be able to talk about, because there's a lot out there. There were a lot of very good comments. And so because this encompasses such a wide range of topics, it would be really easy for us to sort of go down a rabbit hole and not be able to find our way back. So commission staff did a really great job of sorting through all of those topics and looking at how frequently did a certain topic come up, how many people commented in the same sort of vein, and what, if anything, can we do within our existing jurisdiction? And that was a big factor as well, to be able to ensure that what we're talking about, and if we make decisions to move forward, that we're staying well within the bounds of our statutorily enacted jurisdiction. So based on all of those considerations, we have in front of us 5 different topics that we have a variety of choices. We can do nothing. We can talk about it a little bit today and then decide we don't need to go any further. We can talk about whether or not we ask utilities to address some of these topics in the rate cases. We can follow the EV route, the EV model of convening a workshop, getting interested parties together, talking about things, maybe parsing them out, and then coming back to us. So there's I don't have any preconceived notions. There's no kind of set agenda in terms of where this has to end up. I think as I'm seeing the topic discussed more and more nationally, I know EEI came out with a roadmap, EPRI is looking at it. All of the largest utilities have their own sort of roadmap. So Alliant has their blueprint, WEC has their generation reshaping plan. So everybody's thinking about these topics, and I think that this is a good way for us to continue to stay abreast of what's happening in the absence of an integrated resource plan. Right, so that's the other thing, is when we're looking at on the one hand, we hear, well, new solar facilities are coming fast and furious. What's going on? Well, we don't have integrated resource planning here. So we have a very unique situation where we look at projects one at a time. And through the existing jurisdiction that we have, it might make sense for us to try and seek more data about these plans that are already public so that we have more information available to us rather than less. So again, there are a number of topics. Utility resource planning is the one that came up, I think, the most. Performance-based regulation was identified as a topic for us to discuss today. Pilot programming, energy efficiency, and customer affordability. So there's a lot of information on any one of these topics, but I just want to thank staff again for the job of combing through all of the comments. Some comments were a little more clear than others. And so I want to commend staff for doing a really great job of getting through all that information. So I will pause and I will let my colleagues, if you wish to have any opening comments, otherwise the first alternatives we have in front of us appear on page 12 of our memo, and it relates to utility resource planning. But I will pause and see if anybody would like to make any comments. Commissioner Noe.
Thank you. We did receive a lot of good comments. We did receive some, though, that after reading through a lot of them, I thought maybe we should have a workshop on the jurisdiction of the PSC and PSC 101 to help everyone understand exactly what our role is, because I think, they have good, they're passionate about those ideas, but they're really better taken care of down in the Capitol or in other places. So just because we don't act on them, people shouldn't think that, we can only act on what we're allowed to act on. So sometimes the comments, I think, are misdirected at we're the wrong messenger to deliver that to. So I'll just say that at the outset. But, and yes, this topic is being discussed all around. And I just returned from a discussion with colleagues from around the country talking about the transition. And one of the things I continue to find interesting is that more and more not hearing about transition to 100% carbon-free or all renewables. It's more of a cleaner environment, because I think there's some strong consensus that, operating the grid with zero carbon is, as we know it now, not a feasible thing. And so that's just what concerns me, too, about the title of I didn't think we should open the investigation, just because I think that a roadmap to zero carbon is the wrong road to go down. And I don't know that that's the correct path for the state. I think we have to go down a road to cleaner energy. But zero carbon would be, I think, misguided, because it ignores, again, what we're hearing more is, we have to really continue to diversify our generation resources. And that includes something that we have, the two of the best clean sources we have that even aren't on this are hydro and nuclear as well. And we need to continue that discussion here if we're really serious about going down that road. So I don't see this, and I hope no one sees this as an endorsement as the PSC believes that we're going to go to a zero carbon, because no one knows that we can. And I don't think any of the utilities are really even saying that. They say net zero, and, there's a lot of wiggle room in what all that means. So I was concerned about, I'm glad we're going to continue the discussion on some of these topics today and how they're narrowed down. But the end game is what I think we have to keep in mind. And as you mentioned, too, the lens we have to look at all of this through is, what is our role? And there were very few people that commented about what are the costs going to be. Customers First did file some comments, and WIG, about, we can do all this, but we have to keep in mind the affordability and reliability of it. And those are the guardrails that I always talk about, that we have to stay in between. And we can't get diverted from those. So we have to do things that are within our legal scope. I think we should, before we continue to embark on a lot of these, try to get a cost analysis done of some of this. There's a lot of different programs going on at the state. They had the governor's task force on climate change, I think that was the name of it. There's a clean energy plan being produced, and then we have a roadmap. But I have yet to see any cost analysis done, and I think that's really important because that's the biggest. We're economic regulators, and we should know at least where some of this cost is headed and how it's going to be paid for. And I think too, as we also go down the road, is take a look at what are the other environmental land use impacts of moving towards, and I'm going to say reduced carbon, not zero carbon. What's that going to be? Because I think that has to be part of this discussion then. And there have been commissions that have contracted out to do studies. Arizona recently just did that to figure out, okay, maybe before we start to go down the road, let's get an idea what the cost is going to be. So I have those three, I guess, goalposts: is legal authority, cost, and land use. What are those impacts as we move down this road? There were a lot of things that were commented in here, again, that were beyond our authority, and I think we shouldn't move down. And we can talk about those maybe as we get into the individual topics. I do think staff kind of reduced the topics to meaningful ways for us to move forward. And I see today as a discussion of just continuing to move. I think there are some things in here that are worth having more of a discussion and hearing from more stakeholders about. There are some that I think we can defer on and we can talk about that. So I'll stop with that, and thank you.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Hebner?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to first thank all the 48 commenters who took the time to provide your priorities and knowledge to us. I read each of the comments. In general, I found the comments were of an extremely high quality, and there was an excellent discussion of the many interrelated topics related to this issue. I do think that seeing the breadth and scope of the comments reinforced the value of the docket in and of itself and the step we took to get comments, because we can see how wide of array there of options and paths that we could go down and ultimately may need to go down. And then figuring out, well, what's our next step? You know, knowing that, as Commissioner Nowak said, you know, we don't have a plan to get to literal generation of only zero carbon by 2050. But we don't need to solve that today either. We're in 2020. So we need to take some steps that are common sense, that are least regrets. I think this memo does a great job. I want to thank staff as well for organizing these comments. I think as I read them and look back at how they were organized, that I agree that the comments or the issues to be decided today were the ones that bubbled up, in addition to some issues that were taken up in other dockets, like rates for distributed energy resources. We have a separate docket on that. EVs came up. We have a separate docket on that, and a lot of pilots going. So I think these 5 areas are excellent next steps, and look forward to discussing what we should do about them. Thanks.
Great. All right, so the first option in front of us talks about utility resource planning. And as I indicated at the outset, you know, Wisconsin is somewhat of an outlier in that we don't have any type of integrated resource planning here. So that puts us in a unique position, especially as Commissioner Nowak points out, the guardrails of affordability, right? So we don't have that cost analysis because utilities aren't required to tell us what their comprehensive plan is. And so using the existing jurisdiction that we have, which is the SEA, it's a Strategic Energy Assessment. And really what that is it's just a snapshot in time. It's telling us what that happened the 2 years prior and looking 5 years out. But it's what we have, and it's what we have to work with. And so we do get very good data. We get very comprehensive data. Sometimes it might be a matter of, should we slice and dice that data in a different manner, the data that we're getting in? Or does it make sense to ask for more data that could serve to help us determine what are the long-term price implications for customers? What are the long-term reliability impacts for the grid? I've got storm restoration on my mind, given the summer that we've had and given what's happening with what used to be low frequency, high impact events. They're no longer low frequency. They're becoming more and more common. And so what are we doing as the regulator to ensure that the grid is ready and it's hardened enough to be resilient to withstand all of the different climate events that are coming? And so I think it behooves us to get more data and to ask questions to ensure reliability, safety, and affordability within our state. We were lucky enough to secure a fellow from the Department of Energy, and they're going to be starting soon. And that'll be a fantastic resource to be able to help cull through the data. RAP, the Regulatory Assistance Project, has been helping us as well because they've also been working in this space across the nation. Because this is a situation where having third parties come in and look at the data can be helpful to ensure that we're not missing something, that we're collecting the right types of data, and that we're looking at it correctly too. That's part of it. So for utility resource planning, I think, again, what I've been saying all along is that we have to do this in a responsible way, understanding the regulatory compact that exists and that has existed for decades. We all understand that compact, but that doesn't mean that we just get to turn over a blank check and tell the utilities go forth and continue to spend money. So I do think it's incumbent upon us to gather more data, especially as it comes to the resources. And the utilities do this all the time. They have whole resource planning departments. So this is information that's out there. I think that there are just additional data points that we can use to help make our decisions even more fulsome. So for utility resource planning, I was at Alt 1, and I was at A and B. So that would be direct commission staff to collect more information on utility resource planning, analysis, and decisions as part of the next SEA. I think in terms of timing with when that request for data goes out related to the SEA, that it makes sense to gather more information. And then B, under Alt 1, is direct commission staff to explore incorporating independent statewide resource planning analysis in the next SEA. I think that's where the DOE fellow could come in. I think that's where RAP could help to look at that data. And again, we're not turning anything on its head. We're not making a drastic move in one way or another. But I don't think that we can responsibly state what is the right choice in terms of new resources to displace already announced retirements of resources if we don't have the right data. So for me, I'm at Alt 1, subs A and B. Commissioner Noy?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a concern with, it makes things a little more difficult since we don't do the IRPs here, but that was a legislative decision and they replaced it with the SEA. And when I read through, there are a lot of comments wanting us to basically dive in and going back to that. And again, the legislature made that decision for a reason. And what concerns me about alternatives A and B is, I understand the intent, but I don't know how we're going to get there without, it's open-ended. And I don't know what questions they would ask. To me, we're starting to go on IRP light. And I need more information about our legal authority on this and what utilities do have. And I'm glad to hear that RAP is helping us. I wasn't aware of that. That's great. And I know we have a fellow coming. But at the end, it's still to make our decisions, I think we should contract out again. Before we go down this whole planning, we should be done in conjunction with some information. Again, I'm just not ready. I don't have enough information here on where to go, but we need to get information on what they're doing, what the utilities are doing, what they're planning, and have a cost analysis done before we really move down a lot of this road. If we're going to go with alternatives, Alt 1 and A and B, I'd like to see it even come back to us before those go out, because I don't know it's open-ended. I don't know what they're going to be asking, and I want to make sure it's something we should be asking, because we open ourselves up to litigation if we start to exceed what we are able to do. And so I'm honestly, right now, kind of at alternative 2, because I need to get some more data from what the utilities are doing and what is our authority to do anything before we move forward. I understand the intent. Sure. I'm just not sure that I'm ready to say, go ask a bunch of questions.
Sure. I think you started with a good list, though, of things that we would ask.
That's the start, but I don't know where it ends. That's the problem.
Yeah. No,
that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, great. I'm at the same spot as you, Chair. I think we have the jurisdiction related to the strategic energy analysis, and I too support alternatives A and B related to directing Commission staff to collect more information and directing Commission staff to explore independent analysis that they can conduct to help. In short, my view, this industry is undergoing a major transition. And as our duty to uphold the public interest in these matters, for us as a commission, for stakeholders, for utilities, and the public to know what's going on and what the plan is. And I think the SCA is what we have today to understand that. I think that multiple stakeholders brought up the idea of metrics and tracking and understanding where are we coming from, where are we going if various plans come to fruition, various power plants retire, various plants come online, and sort of seeing where that takes us. I think that's good. So I have a couple other sort of detailed items. I thought the list on pages 9 and 10 was good, and I would add to that list programs like community solar programs. We Energies has Solar Now. Various utilities have renewable energy riders. So I would bucket all those programs and tariffs together, at least, and they could break them out, each utility, whoever has what. But what contributions are those making to these, resource plants? I think that's a question. How do all those add up? And now I'm going to go on a detail. This doesn't fit anywhere else in the rest of our discussion today. I thought it was notable, though. So We Energies has this program, dedicated renewable energy resource. And from the comments, both Advocate Aurora Health and City of Milwaukee expressed that program does not work for them. On the other side, MG&E has a similar program that does seem to be working. We've seen multiple applications from customers and MG&E. So I think We Energies should really examine that and talk to those customers. We Energies has 150 megawatts of capacity there, which is a sizable amount. Power and Light also has 150 megawatts in a similar program, and we're not seeing those applications come in. So I don't know if they're forthcoming or if there's something about those programs that need to be changed. But I see those as really win-win programs where if local governments or corporations want to pay for new renewables, and that means we get the renewables, but every other customer doesn't have to pay because the corporates and the local governments are meeting climate goals or renewable goals, that's a huge win, and I want to make those programs work. So I think those utilities should look at that. WPS and Excel don't have those, and they, I think, too, should be looking at those renewable energy rider. So that was one. A couple other items, I think, for the next steps. Where we're at, as you said, Chair Bach, this planning is a good step for us. A couple other things were brought up in the comments. One is, where's the natural gas come in? I think that's a great step too. I think, we're going to look at electric heat pumps more and focus on energy. That technology is maturing. So we're not there today in my view, but I think RMI and Robert Owen brought it up. I think it's a great point that as we continue thinking about how the electric and the gas system work together is going to be important both for carbon as well as for reliability, as we saw down in Texas. Okay. Another sort of in that next step bucket to me is distribution grid planning. I know our colleagues to the east and west of us, Minnesota and Michigan, have these dockets underway. I think there's a lot we can learn from them. But as we think at the utility level and the utility planning, I think that's great. And then, I think to me, it's a bookmark to come back to in the future. You've got all these new loads coming in. You've got all these new resources coming in. Distribution grid planning is a different animal. And I think that that's separate from utility planning. And I just think there's a bookmark there to come back to that. And then finally, I wanted to mention a resource for everybody if you haven't seen it. The National Renewable Energy Lab worked with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power on what they called LA 100. So it is a super complex modeling, extremely robust, various scenarios on how to get Los Angeles LA DWP to 100%. And there's multiple pathways, and they can do it by 2045 and I think even by 2040. So I just think that's a really interesting one to look at because it was a 3-year process. So as stakeholders, utilities look at how they're developing plans and roadmaps, I thought that was maybe the best I've seen so far. I haven't seen all of them. So that's my comments on utility planning. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I, this is our discussion time.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. The comments from Aurora, and there were others about particular programs, and maybe they're not happy with it. I get that, but I don't know that this docket's the time or place to start to say, there are means for them to contact their utilities if they don't think those programs are working for them. We shouldn't make decisions based on hearing one side of the story and saying something should go forward based on just one comment when you're talking about perhaps changing a whole program or having them look at something or do something that another utility is doing. Again, that's not our role to tell them what to come forward with. We have to be cognizant of that. I think, too, that the whole natural gas discussion, I guess let's talk about that. There were some people that said, we can't, it is wrong to even have natural gas. That is so unbelievably short-sighted. We need the natural gas. We need all types of fuels to keep the grid going. It keeps us, when you look at the coldest days of the year last year, the wind and solar, the non-carbon was the nuclear was the best non-carbon that was keeping us the energy going, and we need to continue. We don't know how to get there. And as you said, we don't know how we're going to get there, but we should go down that road. There are costs. So we have to be mindful that every step we start to take or tell the utilities to take, which I'm not sure we can do, there is a cost to that, to employers, to people who can't afford a lot. If we're going to start to say you can't have any natural gas in your house, whether it's for heating, electrification, that's part of that cost analysis I'm talking about, because those are going to hit the low income the hardest. If we're going to start recommending, there's people that wanted us to recommend building code change, all that kind of stuff. That is a very far road to go down and very costly. So I think we have to be, careful. And if you look at the last SEA, if you look at some of the, the 5-year look ahead and beyond, our utilities are still planning to use natural gas as peakers and whatnot. They need to. So, sometimes I kind of feel like it's a little, I'm confused. I know where I stand, but we have to continue to keep all options out there and be careful that going down a road, we don't start to incur costs that we're going to regret later. both from a cost standpoint and reliability standpoint. So I just wanted to lay that out there.
Yeah, and I think some of the commenters also responded for that exact same reason of you don't want to approve things that are going to be stranded way before the end of their life. And so I think that's where, the step we'll take today on starting to get more utility plans is hopefully helping us understand better the costs and the trade-offs to various decisions we're going to have to make.
Yeah, I've always said it's all of the above. I've never been one to say we're not going to need that ever. I think it is widely accepted in the industry that they are comfortable with 80% and the technology to achieve 80%, but it's the 20%.
Right.
And we know that the 20% is going to be at the back end of the time horizon. So I don't view this at all as being a way to tell utilities what to do. I can't imagine how we would ever fathom an order that said you're not allowed to build anything but fill in the blank. I think what this is it's getting exactly at what you keep indicating, Commissioner Nowak, and that is what are the costs and what's the plan. So I don't view this in any way, shape, or form as us coming out as a body and saying natural gas is dead in 2021. I look at it as a way of us as a body saying, we know that the utilities have plans as outlined on pages 9 and 10 of the memo. I'd love to hear what the plans are. And I didn't hear Commissioner Huebner necessarily saying that that we should take Aurora's side of the story. I heard it as more, we need to hear about all of the individual utility programs so that we can see if something's not working in a given service territory, then it's our job to help, right? As consumers become prosumers, then it's our job to help make that connection and to say, okay, so then we know the next time that type of a program comes in front of us, well, you're not getting the adoption rate that you had necessarily hoped for. And I don't necessarily think, and again, it's just having the data in one spot to understand what's happening across our state, and what works for one service territory might not necessarily work for another service territory. So I respect your concerns, but certainly wasn't my intention at all, was to tell utilities what to do in terms of, don't ever bring an application for XYZ.
And I think, obviously, today we're not saying, I don't want to go down there. We keep using the word road too much and that's where I agree with you on all the above, but that's not the title of this investigation. That's not the title of the governor's executive order. That was not the intent of the climate change task force, and I'm not sure what's going to come out of the clean energy plan that's being worked on by the Department of Administration. So that's where I'm saying I'm a little confused, because we have a roadmap to carbon free, but we're also saying, hey, we need all the above. So it's like, let's just be real about it then. Let's call it what it is. We're going to go, because being carbon free is very different than being clean. Those are two different things. And I think we need to be realistic and transparent about that.
Sure. Okay. You want to make a motion to change the name?
Can I change the governor's executive order? Okay. Since that doesn't agree with it anymore.
Does carbon capture get to zero carbon?
It depends how much they're capturing from it, right? So, and carbon captures, it's like then other beneficial reuse of it and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of
capturing methane from a landfill rather than flaring it.
Yeah.
Right.
Or, renewable natural gas, or all that. A lot of good things happening in that technology field as well. Yep.
Agreed. Okay. All right.
So I won't make a motion to change it, though.
Okay. All right. So I'm assuming you're saying that.
I'll stay where I'm at, just because like I said, I think we're kind of close on the intent here. I'm just not clear on the way to get there, and I'm not ready to sign on to that.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the next one in front of us is performance regulation. This is another one that's PBR has been around for a while. We've had it in Wisconsin. It lasted for a little bit and then it kind of went away. This is not a new concept. This is nothing that is too terribly earth-shattering, but it is something that's coming up more now as utilities are looking to transition their generation fleet. So several commenters explored or urged us to take a look at performance-based rate making. We have a great economics firm right here in Madison that actually does this all over the world. They go out and they talk performance-based rate making. And so we have resources literally in our backyard that could help us just take a look at it. And again, it's getting at Commissioner North's concern of cost containment and cost affordability. Is there a way? Electricity was generated pretty much the same way with a large base load generating unit for 100 years, and now that's changing. The way that it's being produced, delivered, and consumed is changing. So it makes, in my mind, logical sense to then take a look at the correlating rate-making structure, and does it make sense? As an economic regulator, our job is to incent a particular behavior. That's how that works. And with utilities already stating their goals to get to zero carbon, does it make sense to take a look at the metrics by which we either establish an ROE or other riders that could potentially come into play as they're looking to transition their fleet? So again, I mentioned earlier, RAP, Regulatory Assistance Project, they're doing this in other states. They've done a lot in Michigan already. I think they're going to be a very helpful resource to all of us. And so when I look at performance-based regulation and the more I read about it, the more I wonder if it makes sense for us to follow the same framework that we did for EVs, in that we convene a workshop to hear about it. And that includes us as commissioners, right? So anything that we do, it's an opportunity for us to hear from. That's what we do all the time anyways, but it's okay to bring it into the building to hear about it so that we as commissioners and staff can learn, okay, what's going on in the PBR sort of arena. So I look at this as an opportunity for us to learn more as commissioners and as an agency as a whole. And I would be in favor of following that EV docket procedure where we conduct a workshop and then see what happens out of that workshop. Again, being really deliberate and intentional about the steps that we're taking, but making sure that we have data to back up whatever step we're going to take. So I would start under Alt 1 with conducting a workshop. I know that through discussions that Department of Energy, the grid modernization grants also include a PBR portion to it, so it might make sense for us to apply for those dollars to get a grant to take a look at it. So for this one, I would conduct a workshop and then see. Then we don't know what we don't know. So for this one, I was at Alt 1 and I would just go down the workshop road just as a way of gathering information. So that's where I'm at. Commissioner Noy?
Well, this is one where I do think I agree with you on this one, because I think this is one where we may benefit from not being one of the first states to move down this road, and we can examine and learn from others, because in addition to the states you mentioned, I know Minnesota did if we go this route, I hope ours doesn't take as long as Minnesota. I think it was really long, several years. Rhode Island's done some work. I think I've mentioned before the initiative I've been part of called Renovate. We've looked at and done analyses. So some of that's been done, and I know I can send our staff some. Maybe I have already. I don't remember the analysis that they've done. I'm not, and again, by holding the workshop, I'm not saying this is what we should do. I think, it should be used for an entire way that we set rates, it may be a component of something. Maybe it's that newer technology. Maybe it's something different. Because I like the idea of that incentivizing. That's intriguing and appealing. So I think it makes sense to have a discussion, bring in some others to kind of tell us, because there's not one definition or one model of performance-based rate making, right? So I think we should take a look at what they all are and what may work in certain circumstances here. So I will agree with you on that.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I was at supporting a workshop as well on this. I think a lot of different ideas could be traversed. A lot of different commenters supported this idea. I'm also okay with F, conducting further analysis, but maybe that's a follow-on step or it's a related step. I think there's a lot happening in this space. I've seen headlines of Hawaii doing some things recently. I'm sure we'll learn about that. So I'm fine with just doing the workshop. The utility as a conductor idea came up a lot. Do you envision that? I mean, I guess I would support that as a part, and maybe there's two workshops related to this, sort of like, what does that look like, helping to understand and flesh that out. And then the other area that I think would be really interesting, it kind of ties to the energy efficiency and really the voluntary programs, sort of performance incentives above and beyond the focus, fund. So if the utilities want to do voluntary programs and really scale those up, do we need to provide, or, is it in the public interest to provide incentives to encourage that increased investment? I know, again, both Minnesota, Michigan, and many other states have that. Those are areas that I think would be maybe helpful to look at. I didn't know if you had specific, more granular topics for the workshop.
I think my thought was that, each of us could come up with things that we would like to hear about or that we would like explored, and then work with staff as staff puts together
the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it has to be responsive to issues and to ideas that are important to us.
Okay.
So that's sort of how I was envisioning that. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so the next one is about pilot programming, and this appeared in the Weddy report as a proposal as we talk about that kind of final 20% and the innovation that is likely going to be necessary. There's been a lot of comments about, well, what can we do or should we do? If anything, is it our role to encourage innovation by utilities and allow them that sort of sandbox to play in without the sort of risk of coming to us and we say, well, that's never been done before, so we're not going to allow you to do it, or we're not going to allow you to recover costs. This one, as I initially read through it and I went around and around, of the 5 that were presented to us, this was the one where I landed at Alt 2, only because I think we do have the authority to approve pilot programs. We've approved a bunch of pilot programs, especially related to EV. And so this was the one where, in order to not inundate staff and us and everybody else with a whole bunch of stuff, this one was one that I was content to just sort of press pause. And mostly it's because I think we have an existing framework that allows utilities to seek that approval from us if they have a pilot. So for this one, I was at Alt 2. Commissioner Noy?
Yes, I'm going to agree with you again. Because I read this too. I'm like, well, we do this. I mean, and I think we've gotten better. And this is more incumbent on us when we see something come to us and someone says it's a pilot and we have to say, okay, what do you mean by that? That's our job to go back and put the guardrails. And I think people are learning from that. It has a sunset date. It has reporting. There's certain things in there that we're going to look for it to be. It's not, your entire territory. So I don't know that more needs to be done with this one either. So I agree with you.
Okay, Commissioner Huebner?
I'm going to join you. I would have supported a workshop of some kind, but I agree that we're balancing staff resources and priorities, and we'll talk about a few other items here too with efficiency and affordability. So I'll join you on that and follow your lead there. I think that one item that did come up in the comments that may be helpful for staff to look at as we continue to look at pilots was from the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance about the latest and greatest national standard practice manual. And that's how cost benefit is being analyzed for efficiency and these other types of pilots. So I guess I would just encourage staff as we look at pilots, let's review that comment or maybe reach out to Mia and talk more about, what we're doing and what does their comment entail and how can we dovetail that. I think one of the things that's on my mind is as we look at the pilots is how do we sort of compare them apples to apples, right? Not even saying that, like you said, there's a sandbox of ideas. Some are maybe not going to be cost effective, but that doesn't mean they're not worth exploring. But I think if we have a standard way of looking at them and one pilot is a 0.1 cost effectiveness and the other is a 0.7, okay, neither made the bar, but clearly one was better than the other. And so figuring out how we can do a little more apples to apples. So I guess that's just a comment as we continue to look at pilots. But I can join you, and I think we will see more pilots regardless, as you both said.
You bring up a good point, and that is it's incumbent upon us, right? So when they do come forward with a proposal, it's incumbent upon us to do the research and do that cost-benefit analysis, but also try to remember that we can be flexible too.
Yep.
Try to be flexible too, if it makes sense.
And I think you're both in the same spot, but I don't want to speak for you. I guess my view on that would be we're still encouraging pilots. We want, I think there's a lot of innovation to be had. I don't want to take the no action on this to mean we're not interested in pilots to the utilities. I think at least from my perspective, I definitely am. We just don't need to take action in this forum today. Okay.
I agree. Okay. The next is energy efficiency. So the most common suggestion was, do we or should we, through the quad planning? And again, Commissioner Nowak, this is a little bit of tutorial in how some of this could be accomplished. So, right, it wouldn't be an outgrowth of this docket. You would have to follow the statutory process outlined for quad planning. But one of the most common comments was perhaps we should be looking at ways to align focus with carbon reduction goals. And that's another item that's been up for discussion increasingly that I've heard more about. That one I get a little.
Was it a bug? Oh, okay. Giant. Deputy Council Officer is Chief Bug Killer.
Orkin. This is the Orkin woman.
You got it. Okay. Now we're going to get a bill from DOA for the carpet cleaning, but.
Conservation. Okay, so so as we increase the use of electricity, that's going to mean that we're going to increase the consumption of kilowatt hours, right? And the core focus is to decrease kilowatt hour consumption and to be more efficient. And so I think that there are ways that this can be done. I think it's got to be done thoughtfully. And I think the five issues that are identified in our memo, and that is aligning focused performance goals and program offerings with decarbonization goals, looking at electrification programs and offerings, looking at programs and offerings for low-income customers. I think that these are all very good suggestions, not appropriate for this docket, but I would ask that they at least be considered in our upcoming quad planning process which is a separate docket. It's the 5-FE-104. And again, we can have a discussion about that and if it makes sense at that time. So I appreciate the comments. I agree that we need to at least edit and ask some questions and get some further information. But I think it's most appropriately done in the quad planning docket. So for this one, I was at Open 1, but I was at sub A so that it gets taken care of according to what's in state statute. Commissioner Noack?
Yeah, I was at 2, but I guess A is kind of the same-ish because we're going to say, because I looked at all this and there's a lot in here, and you're right, we have to be, again, careful not to make the energy efficiency program a carbon reduction program. Are there similarities? Absolutely, but energy efficiency isn't necessarily carbon reduction in all cases, and it may impact the cost benefit. It's going to have impact on the cost benefit analysis too, because, you know, if we get more hydro, more nuclear, more, you know, great, they may not want it to have a carbon reduction program. So and again, I think we also have to be cognizant of what is the statutory intent and goal, and what does it say we can do with the program. So I didn't think we should make any preliminary decisions about, well, let's have them ask this or go here, because when we look at the quad planning, we have to look at this in context of everything else, and we shouldn't have a separate discussion. It has to be a holistic discussion when we're looking at it. So I basically, let's defer this discussion until we take up quad planning and see if it's appropriate, necessary, needed at that time.
Okay.
So I guess 1A is the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I think that it was great to see so many commenters supporting increased energy efficiency, highlighting the cost effectiveness, highlighting the capability of these technologies, and how many have become so proven over the years as being successful. And we've got a great program with focus on energy in this state. But we know from potential studies, at least in the past, and I know we'll hear about a new one, for the next quad coming up soon, there is more savings beyond what focus can fund. We know that. So I think looking at energy efficiency more holistically is excellent, and I will join you both at alternative 1A. To me, there's some correlation between those utility voluntary programs and the demand response side. Like I said, kind of back on that performance incentives, and how do we incentivize? Do we need to incentivize? Is it in the public interest? Are we going to get more savings, by getting more demand response, more efficiency than what focus alone is doing? I think those are really important conversations from my perspective. Rate design was brought up a lot. Again, that's a rate case issue, not necessarily here, but I think stakeholders, utilities, should look at those. If the rates for demand response don't encourage saving, or WIG brought up, hey, we need to align the actual peaks with when our companies need to use demand response, not a 12-hour window, but like a 3-hour window when the peak is. I think we should be looking at that, because a lot of the conversations are about building generation or transmission to meet peak, and we know there's costs. So reducing the peak, that means there's savings. So how do we kind of make those all play together? I think that's important. I know we're going to talk about affordability next. To me, efficiency and affordability are really complementary components, where through weatherization and low-income offerings, that's going to be a key way to lower usage and lower bills for customers in the long run. I just wanted to put out there, too, I know we have great collaboration and coordination between ourselves and Focus and DOA and the weatherization program. The federal infrastructure bill, if that ultimately does pass, has another $3.5 billion for that program nationally. We may get, my rough analysis is maybe $70 million for Wisconsin, which is a huge investment in low-income energy efficiency. So continue to coordinate that on both the efficiency for low-income, which is item 3 under this. And I think we'll do that in the quad plan, but I just wanted to point it out. And then we'll talk about affordability next.
Okay.
So thank you.
All right. Okay, so affordability, as you mentioned. So as an outgrowth of prior rate case settlements, certain utilities had agreed to file energy burden analyses with us, and then we, in February of this year, made that a requirement for them to include on their annual report. And what we saw from that data is that, again, there are a lot of ways to define it. There are a lot of ways to define energy burden. There are a lot of ways to define affordability. And so I think we're just at the beginning of this journey of trying to understand, okay, first, do we need to come up with a generally accepted definition of affordability or energy burden, and then communicate with the utilities about how they're calculating it, and have more of a dialogue about what that data looks like. So for me, and Commissioner Nowak, you brought this up about, the cost implications of going down this road, and particularly the impact that it's going to have on low-income customers. And so I think that it probably could fit in really nicely with the performance-based rate-making workshop, that this could be a subset. This would be a subset that I would be interested in at least understanding, is there a carve-out within performance-based rate-making that looks at impact on lower to moderate income customers? What's being done out there? Again, I think this is information, we're in an information gathering phase right now. So I think we need further analysis, but I think for me, where I landed was, I would like customer affordability to be one of the topics that are looked at in that workshop that we agreed to have on performance-based rate making. And then I simply would say that as an outgrowth of that, I would want further analysis, because there's not enough data here, at least in my mind, to make any meaningful progress right now. I think we need to get a handle on the data, and we need to be sure that it's consistent across utilities, so that we're not saying what's affordable to one utility's customers that might not hold true in the opposite side of the state, given the makeup of their service territory. So for this one, I was at Alt 1, F, and H, and my H would be to include it in the performance-based rate-making workshop as a topic.
Okay.
Mr. Nowak?
This one was, I mentioned it the other day. I was at a meeting and I said, affordability, that's in the eye of the beholder, right? And we throw these terms around, and what does a vulnerable customer mean too? You ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. And so that's where I get worried that we do need more information. One, whether we should be carving out, doing things different before we start making decisions based on terms that are not universally accepted. But there's also a lot. I still get confused no matter how many times I see it. We have the programs at DOA. We've got low-income programs even within, there's, opportunities within Focus, even if you're low-income, to have, more incentive. There's the CARES Act. There's probably more money coming from the federal government. It is hard to make decisions, and I don't want to create anything new going forward until we have an understanding of what the lay of the land is and what it may be now with, even more money coming from Congress, and how is that going to affect things. So I think we have to be very careful in carving out and looking at modifying, rate making even. That's why I'm not quite sure. So I'm really more at, I would have the staff do further analysis on doing a good summation of what all the existing programs are out there and what is available to people, and are there even gaps in that? Do we need to do anything? because I think that setting rates based on income can be a very, that is contrary to how we typically go down and set rates. It's cost-based, right? So I think that's something that we have to be careful about doing. And I'm not sure that I can support that because we have so many other programs to help those that are truly in need. And if we start to modify how we're setting rates based on whatever affordability is, we're going to start to skew how we have been doing things for a while. So I'm going to stay I'll be at alternative 1F and just have staff report back to us on what exactly are all the programs, what's out there, what can be done.
Okay, Commissioner Huebner?
Great. Like I kind of led into this, to me, energy efficiency and getting usage down is a key component of this. In my view, I think outside of this docket, we've got coming up next, arrears management programs, those things related to affordability. I think another idea that came up in some of the comments was securitization and the use of that. So I think that conversation is ongoing between utilities and stakeholders. I'm going to join you at 1F for both of you, and then I would be, I'll join you, Chair, at 1H. I kind of had workshop here too. I think the way you framed it though is great, which is under H and include this topic in the PBR workshop. So I'll join you on that one. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is a model out there that I think utilities and stakeholders, this may be one CUB may be particularly interested in, or utilities. It's called Pay As You Save, energy efficiency and housing upgrade programs. They've been successful with many electric co-ops throughout the country. I know Arkansas in particular, within MISO, has at least one electric co-op that has done this program. And from talking to their staff over many years at different events, I see Wally Nixon, and he continues to be supportive of the outcomes. So I think that's a model that can help maybe to focus even more on low-income energy efficiency and reducing the bills by improving the housing stock, improving the efficiency of the building, so that we're not just, doing an AMP or paying a LIHEAP dollars. We're actually reducing the usage so that we can hopefully sustainably be more affordable in the long run. So I'll throw that out there as another idea that I think our utilities and stakeholders should be looking at.
Okay.
All right. Let's do one big one.
Yeah, your house expense will be noted.
I'll move that the commission direct in docket 5 EI 158 that commission direct commission staff to draft report consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. The final item on our agenda is actually 3 different dockets, but they all have the same decision point, so we're taking them up as one. In 5820-TE-101, 5820-TG-101, 5820-TW-101, and the application of Superior Water, Light, and Power Company for approval of an arrears management program. So we've seen a number of arrears management programs. We had required that utilities file with us proposals on how they would address financial impacts of customer arrears, predominantly coming out of COVID, by the beginning of this year. And the company did timely submit their plan and indicated that they were going to follow up with a separate plan. And in the intervening months, they spent a lot of time working with commission staff, and they then submitted their final application in April. And so in this particular arrears management plan, they would have a $200 threshold for at least one service type that is 60 or more days past due. And for this initial year, and I know that there's a little bit of timing. I read in their comments, that because They were thinking that we would have taken this up earlier in the summer, but that sort of slides things a little bit. It changes their numbers a little bit as well. But the plan was to have this available for all 2021 residential customers, any customer. And then after the end of this year, so starting January of next year, this program would only be available to customers who receive the low-income energy assistance benefit in a given year. And then that threshold would stay at $200. They would enter into a special payment agreement for up to a 24-month repayment period of their past due balances. And then the company proposes, similar to other programs, they propose that they would remove customers once that customer has missed 3 consecutive payments, and then the customers would not be allowed to re-enroll for either 12 months or until they've taken care of their total arrears balance in full, whichever comes first. So as of May of this year, 1,269 total residential customers would be eligible, and that includes 320 low-income customers. It's interesting for me to note that of all of our investor-owned utilities, they have the largest percentage of renters. And so I think that makes a difference in terms of their customer base. We have approved arrears management plans before. We also have approved, the Commission has approved the low-income programs that are offered by other utilities. So the reason that the company picked $200 as their threshold is because that's what they determined their average residential utility bill is, and that's for combined electric, gas, and water. It's between $200 and $300 a month. And so the goal here, as stated by the applicant, is consistent with the goal for all arrears management plans, and that is to try to nurture positive payment behavior, right? So the more consistent a customer pays, in the long run, it shows the better off all customers of the utility are, because even $5 a month in the door does something to lower the total arrears amount for that utility, which in most cases gets then socialized across all of the utilities customers. So programs that incentivize or that make it, that equip customers with the tools to continue to get on a consistent payment schedule have been proven to show long-term benefits. It also reduces the cost to the utilities to roll the trucks to do the disconnections, to roll the trucks to do the reconnections, the time that's spent at all of the customer call centers with the outbound calls and working with the customers. If you can get customers to consistently pay their bills, you're also reducing those the costs associated with working those customer accounts. So they propose for this program that customers would pay their current charge plus the full equal installment of whatever their arrears balance is, and then spread that out over 24 months. And they do, the company was very explicit about proposing to work with customers and connect them to other payment offerings and collaborate with other energy assistance entities. So for me, the one place I get a little tripped up when we talk about arrears management is you're talking about customers who are, I guess in my definition, vulnerable customers. And for them, if they have, say they have just for purposes of round numbers, and I promise, Cindy, I won't do actual math, I'll pretend to do math, but if a customer has $1,000 in arrears and their current bill is $200, the payment that they're going to enter into is going to take that $1,000 of arrears, it's going to chunk it up, and say it chunks it up over 24 months. So that's going to be due every month in addition to their current amount. And the thing that trips me up is they have arrears because they weren't able to keep up with their current amount. So if now we're adding on top of their current amount, are we setting them up for failure, or are we setting them up for successful, consistent payment behavior? And in their comments back, Superior did say that because the suggestion was made, perhaps budget billing, which is afforded to all customers, perhaps that budget billing number should be used instead of just dividing up the past arrears balance. And Superior said, well, you know what, we really kind of wanted to use the budget billing as the backstop. We think that let's go out first and work this first agreement with customers, and we can always use budget billing as our backdrop. But then they followed it up with, but we are open to working and perhaps using that budget billing amount. And the utility is correct, and they pointed out that no utility is in the business of disconnection, right? That they're in the business of selling kWhs and therms and gallons of water. That's their business model. So it behooves both the utility and the customer to keep the customer connected. But for this one, I just think that, and since they've shown a willingness to do so, I think it makes more sense for them to modify their design to allow for that budget billing amount. I think the customer is in arrears because they're having trouble meeting that current amount. And I think that allowing for the budget billing and current bill goes further in trying to actually accomplish that positive payment behavior that is the goal of this program. So for this one, I was at Alt 1. I would require the utility to go back and modify it to allow for that budget billing. Commissioner Nowak?
Thanks for the summary. I think the utility, they were very thoughtful in bringing this forward, and overall, I think it's a decent program because it does keep an incentive to continue to pay your bill going forward, which is the habit that we need people to continue to do. But it also puts, it doesn't, like another program we've approved, give 100% arrearage forgiveness. And so this, I think, is more fair to all the customers that are, should we approve it later, ultimately going to help picking up the rest of the tab. With respect to so this is an opt-in program. So, if the customer does want to stay on budget billing and enter in a separate DPA without, they can do that. I think I am not right now in favor of having them offer both this on, like, pancake this, like offering on top of it with budget billing. One, just because I think it's going to cause some confusion because there's not we can maybe talk about it later, how many times if you drop off and re-enter, those timelines don't sync up, and that could be a real mess later on. I think that what we should just do here is, I think they're just going to have to see how this plays out with some of the customers. And it would not surprise me if the utility comes back and maybe then want to modify something. This is one of those things where I think they're going to have to, they seem to know their customer base. They're going to have to work with them, come back and see what is really going to work rather than us, because it might not be budget billing. It might be something different later. So I think I like the $200. That was fine. The three-month consecutive payment I thought was very fair. I would not change anything right now the way they brought it in. So I'm alternative 2.
Yeah, just some kind of opening remarks about the program. I think I'm going to be supporting elements of it, or I'm going to be supporting the program, but sort of just barely. I think your concern, Chair, is exactly where I was at, which is, I guess it's the way that DPAs, I guess, are probably done too, but I guess I would be more in favor of the way that Power and Light proposed it, which is establishing that consistent payment of your bill and kind of restarting that. And we'll see with Power and Light if that's able to get customers current and keep them paying going forward. The concept here where you've got your current bill and then you've got to pay on top of it, I think it's open, and we'll see with the results whether or not that ultimately, which one of those models is more effective. But at the end of the day, I think this is an additional program that I do think will help, so I will be supporting it. I was really torn on this one too. I think there's positives and negatives on both sides to sort of requiring that budget billing on current bills. So I guess I ended up at alternative 1. I think it's a more appropriate way, but I do think that they're going to modify this and then come back with an updated tariff. So I guess my follow-on would be if staff's able to learn more based on their comments or otherwise that there's going to be just this huge billing mess, then maybe it needs to come back to us if it's not really possible from a billing system perspective or a customer confusion. But I do think the sentiment of budget billing will, at the end of the day, help this be more successful. So I was at alternative 1.
Okay. All right. The next is the match schedule for forgiveness. So I think, as we all indicated, if the customer makes 3 consecutive on-time payments, then they're eligible for that match. There was a suggestion that perhaps the company should modify its design to include a mechanism to address barriers. I'm not there because I think we need to let it play out. So I think this program is going to spur a lot of conversation between Superior and its customers, and then with our Consumer Affairs division. So for this one, I would just, and I think, staff would do this anyways, but I was just at Alt 2 where I would ask staff to analyze the reported data that we're going to talk about, and then just identify if it's not working. If they see one part of the program that's acting as a barrier, then I think that they can report that to us, and I'm assuming that they will have that conversation with utilities as well to further refine it. So for this one, I was at Alt 2.
Yeah, I agree. We can't address a barrier that we don't know if it exists.
Right.
So,
right.
So Alt 2 just says, and we'll get to the reporting later. If it shows up later in reports and analysis, then perhaps there's a tweak, then we'll take care of it then, or they will take care of it and propose it. So I'll join you at alternative 2.
Okay. Commissioner Hebner.
I'm at alternative 2 as well on this.
Great. So the next is re-enrollment. This is something that we talked about with past programs. This one, again, is that if you miss 3 consecutive payments, then you're going to be removed. And once you're removed, you've got that 12 months for paying off your total arrears, whichever comes first. But there's no limit on how many times that a customer can miss a single program or a single payment, right? Because it only kicks in if it's 3 consecutive. There's also no limit in terms of a customer asking to be removed and then being put back on, and removed and being put back on. So I think that obviously, the utility is in the best position to work with their own customer to determine if a program is working or not working. But I think that we need to put a limit on the number that a customer can request removal and then be put back on. Because while not all customers have bad intentions, I think with the advent of any new program, there's a potential to sort of seek out, well, is there some kind of a loophole that I can, avail myself of? And I think I think it probably makes sense to place a defined limitation on the number of times that a customer can re-enroll in this specific time period. And that's not unlike what we've seen in other programs. So for this one, I was at Alt 1, and I would just want to make it clear that this also includes, it's not that this limit would also include those customers who are saying, take me off, and then the next month they're saying, put me back on, take me off, put me back on. So I'm at Alt 1. Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, this one was a little harder which way to go, because I agree, I don't want someone to, if someone's spending that much time trying to find a loophole and game the system, first you need a new hobby, and second, but it may happen, but then I suppose this leaves it up to the utility to come back and propose what that limit is, because I don't know what that limit would be, right? So then I thought, well, maybe just in the reporting, it'll, again, if this is a problem, they can come back and ask for a modification to their tariff. Mm-hmm. So I ultimately ended up at Alt 2 because it was kind of like the last one. And I know we've done this in other cases. I just don't, for this one, I feel like I'm more at the point where if it's a problem, like the barrier, I don't know if that exists yet, it's not that hard to come back and ask for a modification to the tariff or the limit of the number of times and how it works. So I'm going to stay at alternative 2 here right now, recognizing that this may change later.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Healy?
I landed at alternative 1 on this, and I think it was just kind of a discrimination, making sure that there isn't a certain customer that maybe a squeaky wheel or more friendly gets an extra time on the tariff versus someone else gets less. And so I don't know what the limit should be either. And I do think it's per a specific time period makes sense, because certainly as years progress, if you're up and down, you've got a job, you don't, you're up and down, we want to create that possibility. But if it's, 4 times or, 4 times in a month or something, that would be extreme. So I'm at alternative 1 just to make sure everybody has the same rules.
Have them come. You don't have a number?
I don't know. I don't know what the right number would be.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'll stay there. Yep.
Okay, so the next is correspondence. And this one is they need to make this correspondence available in languages other than English, just to be sure that they're communicating with all of their customers. This is another one that we saw, I think, in PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. So for this one, I'm at Alt 1.
Yeah, and then I had asked if they make their other, and I probably should have asked this in PowerPoint, do they make their other customer notices available in other languages? They said no. I also asked if there were any complaints that we had received about lack of accessibility regarding due to language, and the answer was no. So, again, going back to, I'm going to trust that the utility here knows its customer base better than we do, and, for a reason hasn't had the other offerings that way. So if there's a problem later, it can come to us, but they came to us with it for a reason, I believe, of done business. There's nothing here to persuade me that it's necessary to be done right now. So I'm at alternative. I flip my pages. Hang on. 2. Okay.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I was at alternative one here too. I think you made some good points, Commissioner Nowak. They certainly know better, but even if it's just a matter of, at the top saying the titles in Spanish or translating to Spanish, I think, or whatever languages.
Don't know the language, yeah.
Maybe predominant up there. Just to make sure that all customers are aware of the program and can take advantage of it. I think that in general, that's an appropriate step to take. So I was at alternative one.
Okay. The next one is cost effectiveness. So is this one the program part because the program hasn't started? Right. So it's a little, it's hard for us to look into our crystal balls. Other than what we know based on other programs and the types of savings that are seen, it also depends on ultimately the level of customers that enroll and that are eligible, and then it also, of course, depends on what other forms of energy assistance they have available to them or that they're using. And so I think it's going to be really important that we get back all sorts of information so that we can ensure that it is cost effective, similar to the energy solar pilot where we required them to come back to us with kind of a check-in to ensure that the programs remain cost effective, because that has to be one of the bases upon which we make our determination to approve this pilot. And I'm ready to approve it as a pilot, but I think that all of the metrics that are indicated on page 22 are necessary. And just as a point of clarification, the word biannual is in here, and I'm not intending us to be getting this information twice a year. So I would use biennial. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's just me being
I thought of our plain language training that we had on Monday where, speak what you mean. So
I think
every 2 years or twice a year. I'm not sure.
Yes, I would like every 2 years. I think if we did twice a year, by the time we got the second batch of information, it would be stale. So I am in favor of every 2 years. And then, there are, in particular, the utility indicated not a concern, but just that they would like to have a little more conversation with us, especially as it relates to number 7, and that's the number of disconnections, reconnections, and moves for comparison. And while I think that that's a meaningful metric and a data point for us to look at, I think it makes sense for consumer affairs to get more input from the utility because they indicated in their comments it might be a little tricky. Mm-hmm. I think they understand the intent, and so I guess that kind of puts me at Alt 2, which would just be to require the utility to work with staff to develop the metrics. But in my mind, I would like all 8 of the enumerated metrics on page 4 to be included in whatever staff and the utility end up with. Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, is this the one where we take it up as hang on, pilot or, okay. So I thought the reporting was good. I thought the cost analysis that staff had performed was very helpful. But yeah, time will tell, right? So they did express some concern about, I think, the complexity of some of the information, and I would just ask, I'm fine with every 2 years, the reporting, ask that staff does work with them to, what can they realistically do? I don't doubt that the utility wants to provide good data to us as well if they want to, they want this to be successful. So I'm fine with, and I think it is all 2 as well. we'll just say every 2 years on
Okay.
that.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I was at alternative 2 as well, and in a similar spot. I think most of the metrics, it looks like they're fine. Let's work out the kinks on any remaining ones and move forward. I would have been going with annual reporting, but I'll join you both at biannual if that's what you are at.
Okay, great. All right, now the next one is the program overall and whether or not we approve it as a permanent program or as a pilot program. I understand, given the time that it's going to take to get people enrolled, that making this a 1-year pilot doesn't make any sense because we won't get any information. So for this one, I'm not ready to approve it as a permanent program. I am ready to approve this as a pilot. And then, so that puts me at Alt 3, and then Sub-Alt B, I would ask for them to come back in 3 years to tell us, yep, we're gonna keep it, we're gonna change it, or we're gonna get rid of it. And of course, that doesn't preclude them from coming in sooner.
Mhm.
So I was at Alt 3, Sub-Alt B. Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I was ready to approve it as permanent just because, if they want to change it later, they can modify it. I didn't see anything that struck me as that this needed to be sunsetted by us after a certain time, and then they have to, ask for its continuation. The reporting itself will here inform us. So, but if we want to say 3 years, like you said, they can always come in earlier. So my preference is alternative 2, just to make it permanent, and we can wait to see where the reporting comes in.
So then, based on the reporting, if cost-benefit analysis shows...
They can address it in a rate case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we just bring it up in a rate case and say, address it there.
Right, okay. Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I was at the 3-year pilot as well, alternative 3B.
Okay. Any inclination to just approve it as permanent, or you think it's better as pilot?
I'm okay with it. If you want to review it in rate cases, instead the 3 years just gives us that chance to, we know it's a check-in point, and we did that with Power and Light, and I thought that was appropriate there too. But
I'm I don't have a very strong opinion. On the one hand, it keeps it on our radar so that we kind of remember, we need to come in and check in on this. On the other hand, we're requiring reporting anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if
I guess I would lean toward a pilot because, like I said at the beginning, I'm not sure if this model is going to work better or worse than Power and Light. So I guess I would think it's a pilot in my view, and I'll stay there because I want to see which ones work better. And if another one's working better, then we want to switch this utility over to that if it works for them too.
okay,
So
all right.
Anyway.
I'll stay where I started.
Okay. I'll stay where I'm at. I'm trying to not use the word pilot. How long that lasts.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Then the final is accounting treatment. So they've requested the ability to have deferral accounting treatment for the incremental portion of the bad debt expense. I would agree with staff's recommendation, and I would also require them to use escrow accounting, just because escrow is the method by which you're protecting both customers and shareholders, so that the utility comes out in a sort of net neutral spot. So I was okay with approving the request for deferral accounting, and then I would require them to implement that escrow for the bad debt expense. So I'm at Alt 2. Commissioner Noel?
Yeah, I agree with that. It provides the best protection.
Okay,
I'm at alternative 2 as well.
great.
Thank you.
Okay.
We good?
Ready? Yep.
Okay, all three at once?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one program.
Yeah.
Applicable across service.
So in docket 5820 TE 101, 5820 TG 101, 5820 TW 101, I move that the commission accept and as modified the application of Superior Water, Light, and Power Company for approval of its proposed arrears management program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 9th, 2021 at 10:30 a.m. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we can adjourn until that date and time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.